Welcome to another edition of Moxie Talk, where we give you an intimate look into the courage, character, and defining moments of today's most inspiring individuals. I'm Kirt Jacobs, host of Moxie Talk, where previous guests have included leaders from the world of politics, business, culinary, sports, entertainment, art, law, community activism, and philanthropy. Today, our 435th guest in our series, we welcome LYNDON Pryor. He's the president and CEO of the Louisville Urban League, which is a historic civil rights organization and part of the National Urban League movement. LYNDON leads a team of dynamic individuals who are working to transform Louisville into a more equitable community for Black people and other marginalized populations through intentional work in jobs, justice, education, health, housing, and Black business. Prior to his current role, Pryor spent 8 years with the organization in various capacities, including as Chief Engagement Officer, where he spearheaded special projects like A Path Forward for Louisville, which oversaw all communication areas and enhanced the smooth and efficient integration of services to maximize the potential outcomes for every league participant. Mr. Pryor also created and led the league's community health program, quote, "It starts with me," and he helped to build and grow Louisville's network of community health workers. And since then, he has helped to establish policy positions, internal data systems, and key infrastructure support for the league's work. Now, before arriving in Louisville, LYNDON was a student development specialist at Texas A&M University, where he worked to assist students in their personal growth and build their professional competencies and leadership skills. Mr. Pryor provided critical leadership, supporting students by creating programs that effectively merge academic and practical experiences. Mr. Pryor is a proud former student of Texas A&M University, where he received his BS in political science, and he also received his MA in education and human development from George Washington University. He is a husband, father, and an avid believer in the potential of all. Amen. And that communal knowledge enhances individual growth. Welcome, LYNDON, and we are honored that you've taken your valuable time to be here today on Moxie Talk. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What drives you to excel in your area of expertise?
Honestly, community. That has been for as long as I can remember, and at least going back to high school, I have always been a profound believer in community. You know, the community that I've had around me as a kid, not just my family, but family, friends, church family, neighborhood, the whole nine. I've had so many people who have looked out for me and who have cared for me in ways that, you know, are just kind of hard to even explain. And so I've always wanted to see community thrive and grow and persevere.
LYNDON, whom do you credit most influential in your life? And it can be more than one, personal or professional.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would start with my parents. I think they did a great job of encouraging me to be the best that I could be, but doing so without really a whole lot of expectations for what that would look like. They did a great job of saying, you know, go out and be and do whatever it is you feel like you need to be and do, and that freedom, I didn't realize it at the time, but now as an adult, that freedom was absolutely remarkable.
Do you feel like the position you have now as the leader of the Louisville Urban League, was it an evolution or how you got there, or was it kind of something that was kind of brewing in the back of your mind for a decade or so? I'm just curious.
Oh no, it was absolutely happenstance.
Okay.
It was not, you know, it was not a job that I sought. It was a job that I just happened to be asked to do, and I am grateful that, you know, I was ready and prepared to do it. I can't say that it never crossed my mind, but even that was only up until recently, probably in the last couple of years, that I even started to think about doing that role. But it was never a job that I had ever anticipated or even thought. I mean, even working at the Urban League wasn't something that I ever thought that I would do.
You know, sadly, we lost your predecessor a couple back, Ben Richmond. He was our 39th guest. Love the guy.
Yeah.
Respected the heck out of him. He had a lot of moxie. That's why he was one of our first guests. Do you feel like, had he not been in the history of the Louisville Urban League, would the opportunity presented itself in the way it did to you, or do you think that it would have happened as well?
That's hard to say.
Sure.
What I can say is that without Ben, the Urban League would not be what it is
Right.
today. I mean, just its location alone, the fact that it is in a prominent place on Broadway is absolutely because of Ben Richmond and his forethought and his vision and his tenacity, his willingness to go and fight for that space. But so we absolutely would not be the organization that we are had it not been for Ben Richmond.
And Ben was, obviously we're here for you today, but he had kind of a stoic but very powerful presence.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people ever underestimated him. I hope they didn't. I didn't. But he had that demeanor about him. He wasn't really overt in the way he went about things. But man, he got a lot done. So that's why I wanted to bring him up.
Yeah, absolutely. He was very much a quiet leader. Like he wasn't going to be one who was always out in front. And he told me, that just kind of wasn't his style.
Yeah.
But for those who know Ben and who knew him, he got things done.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to guess where he stood on issues. You didn't have to try to figure out what his position was going to be. He was going to let you know. It may not be in front of a camera, but you were going to be well aware of where Ben Richmond stood on things.
And kudos to you. You and others gave a beautiful eulogy when he passed. I was there and watched it. And when I saw you, I was like, Lyndon and I need to talk. You need to come and sit down with us. What do you consider to be the most defining moment in your life, Lyndon? And again, it can be more than one, personal or professional.
Yeah, I have a hard time with a singular moment, but I do think like college, I kind of put that in a box, right? Like college was an incredible time for me, a real place of growth, and not necessarily easy things, right? Like it was a struggle for me to get through college for lots of different reasons. But I learned a lot about myself and who I am. I got to learn a lot more about the world and how I wanted to position myself in it. And so I really look at my time in college as being a truly defining period in my life.
What do you consider to be your biggest professional triumph? And it could be personal as well, and it could be more than one.
Yeah, I struggle with the word triumph, right? Like because I think a lot of the work that I do is ongoing. Like we haven't arrived yet. I think about the role that I played in bringing forth a path forward for Louisville and the initiative that we have under the Urban League, but it's a collaborative across organizations and individuals all across this city, and it's done phenomenal things, and it has the potential to do a heck of a lot more, and so I'm really proud to have been a part of that, and to help be able to continue to shepherd and guide it through.
Now you guys have your own Derby Gala. I was going to ask you to speak to that. We'll show a picture of it later on.
Sure,
in the program. How long has it been going on roughly, and what's kind of the motivation behind it?
Yeah, so this will be year 7, I believe.
Lucky 7. Cool.
That we'll be doing the Derby Gala. Now, the Louisville Urban League has always had a gala, but it used to take place in the fall. But then under the leadership of Sadiqa Reynolds, she said, hey, let's switch this up. Let's do this during Derby, because that's when the city's partying, so let's have our party there too. And we like to think of ourselves as kicking off Derby week, because our event is always the Wednesday before Derby, and so we are one of the best parties in town. Yeah,
it looks like some of the pictures I've seen, it looks really great.
Yeah, it's a great time.
What does Lyndon Pryor consider the most challenging life lesson that he's ever learned? Again, it could be more than one, personal, professional.
Sure. Challenging for me is that change takes time. I can be incredibly impatient,
I hear you.
particularly when it comes to things that I think aren't that difficult to solve. And sometimes, even the problems of the world for me don't seem like they should be that hard, but because of the world we live in, because people are people, or bureaucracies or whatever the case may be, things take longer, and that is incredibly frustrating for me at times, because I know that people need and deserve the opportunity to thrive, and sometimes that takes longer than it should.
When I first actually met you, I heard you speak at the eulogy, like I mentioned earlier, for Ben Richmond, but it was at the Louisville Downtown Rotary Association, and I heard, and the way you articulated equity in our country, and we can do a whole 2-hour program on that, you couched it in such a way that was mindful, respectful, and challenging, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe speak about how and maybe why you approach it that way, because not everyone does. They might be a little more aggressive, I can't think of the right word off the top of my head, about the subject matter.
Yeah, I think equity is hard for people to understand, and I think right now in the climate that we're in, it is incredibly mischaracterized for what it is. People are using it to benefit their own agendas, but not actually articulating what it is. I think equity is something that we all really understand if we think about it, right? Like it is this idea that we are going to make room and make space and accommodations for those who, for whatever reason, may not have had the opportunity to access or enjoy certain benefits that we all should have, right? Like, and so I think we can all actually understand that. We all want to be on the receiving end of equity in our personal lives, whether that be in small settings where, you know, you're late for a meeting and you want people to be able to show up and you know, and help you get into the meeting, or on big things, right? Like when you've been able to miss out on things like housing or healthcare or those sorts of things. We understand it when it applies to us. I think the challenge is how do we see that value for other people? How do we get people to recognize that equity should be something that we're searching for and trying to give to all people? And that is where I think there is a slight disconnect, is because sometimes as a society, we have a hard time decentering ourselves and our own personal experiences and thinking about the whole and how can we do the same thing for somebody else.
And you had made some references, without getting into specifics, that there's still holdover thought patterns and systemic things that go on in American society that we don't often recognize until it's pointed out.
Right.
And I thought that was phenomenal. I'll just use the term car insurance, and anyone can take it from there.
Yeah.
I thought your illustration of that was remarkably simple and powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. You know? I mean, we have lots of people who are unable to drive, not because they can't afford a car, right? But because they can't afford car insurance, and how car insurance rates differ depending on where you live in a certain part of the city. And so we are intentionally or unintentionally disenfranchising entire people from being able to drive or transport themselves and their families around this city. But these are things that we don't think about, we don't consider, and we don't really unpack when we start to talk about disparities and how other people are affected.
What is the biggest risk you've ever taken, Lyndon? And again, it could be more than one, personal, professional, and did it pay off? You know, not all risks end in the way you want.
Sure. I mean, biggest risk, I think there are probably several. I would say, you know, going to grad school was one. You know, that was a decision that I really wrestled with, and whether or not I was going to do that or not. I would say, honestly, the decision I made leaving grad school, which was going back to Texas to be near my family, and my father at the time was ill, and so I did that there, but I had opportunities to go other places and to seek professional opportunities in other places, but I went back there. And those things all proved to be incredibly beneficial in the long run, and I'm glad that they worked out.
Did you see the opportunity you have now, and obviously the reason why you're here today, the role you're in, the position, did you see that as a risk or an opportunity or maybe a mixture when
Absolutely,
it was presented to you?
Absolutely an opportunity, never a risk. I mean, I've been with the Urban League for almost 9 years at this point, and I know the work, I believe in the work, I know the opportunity that we had before us. There was no risk to it for me. I mean, I was going to do everything I could to be successful, and if for some reason I wasn't, then I was going to ensure that whoever comes behind me was going to be set up for success wherever they can be. So never a risk, always an opportunity.
Do you feel like your experience so far in the leadership role has been what you expected, or very different, or maybe a mixture of that, or what maybe your predecessors had told you or you'd observed over the years?
You know, I think it is about what I expected. I think, and it's interesting, you know, being at a time where we're kind of in the middle of a legislative session where there's a lot that is flying around that impacts the folks that we serve. And so having to manage a lot of things that are outside of the realm of our control, I think I knew it was coming, but I can't say that I expected the volume in which it's coming. And so having to deal with it at that level is a bit unexpected and challenging. But that's what we're here to do, right? Like, that's what I signed up for, and so I'm excited to continue to do it, and we're going to continue to fight and work hard.
That's great. What do you consider to be your biggest mistake, or I could say disappointment in your human journey? And that's self-interpretive, obviously subjective.
Yeah, you know, Honestly, I wish, I spoke about college earlier.
Sure.
I wish I'd have done more, right? Like I wish I'd have taken more opportunities, advantage of more opportunities while I was in school.
You mean extracurricular
Yeah,
kind of things?
so whether that be study abroad at the time or just even some of the fun things, right? Like, and I had a lot of fun, but there was a lot of fun that I passed up on. There was a lot of fun that I passed up on, and just didn't realize at the time that what an opportunity that time is in our lives, and that you never really get it back. And that doesn't mean you don't go on to have great fun and lots of other things, but that window, that 4 to 5 years, is somewhat of a sweet spot in life, and you want to be able to maximize
Absolutely.
it.
I call it being nimble.
Yeah.
Which is, as you get older, I don't mean physically, I'm talking about, experientially, or however you want to look at it.
Absolutely.
The human experience is, there's children, most likely, a partner, and then there's work and responsibilities, a mortgage, I could go on, and it's all your your ability to do things on the fly is a lot less.
I tell college students when I was working in higher education, and even now when I tell them, I say, look, you will not believe me when I tell you this, but trust me when I say you are as free now as you will ever be in your entire life. And I said, I know it may not feel like that, and everybody's situation is a little different, but I promise you are as free in this 4 to 5 year period. You are as free as you will ever be in life. Take full advantage of it. And so,
what do you consider to be the best piece of advice ever given to you, Lyndon? And again, it can be more than one, personal, professional.
From my parents, do what you love. That is the thing that they, really impressed upon my siblings and I. They never had a desire for us to be this thing or that thing or have a particular career. They simply said, find what you love and do that. And they literally said, don't worry about the money. The money will come. You'll figure that part out. Do what you love. Enjoy the work that you do. And that's going to be the thing that matters.
And at least for me, as you get older, you find that money becomes a tool to grease the wheels of society so you can function. And it's not the end-all, be-all that not maybe when you're younger it appears to be at times. So.
No, not at all. I mean, I think, and unfortunately, I think a lot of kids are pressed into positions or majors or job tracks because they're seeking the money. And finance, unfortunately, is going to always be a part of what we do, and it is, unfortunately, a growing part of what we need in society. But I think that it does such a disservice to a lot of young people who, quite frankly, are missing out on their calling because, they wound up in a career that they don't necessarily love. Maybe they like it, maybe they grow to enjoy it, but it isn't the thing that would feed their soul. And so I used to say all the time that there are probably some brilliant teachers and educators, who are currently accountants or investment bankers or doing something else because, they sought, finance or money or those opportunities, and there are kids who are missing out on that brilliance and on that expertise who would really benefit from that. And so I really wish that we would allow and afford people to really invest in their passions.
When was that aha moment when you realized, the life path and human journey that you selected and you're on now? Was there one or two moments looking back where it kind of clicked for you? I think that happens for most humans, regardless of their profession or personal decisions.
Yeah, it was 8th grade, actually. Between 7th and 8th grade, our district, I went to public school in Houston, Texas. The district redrew kind of the mapping lines. Okay. And so I was in 7th grade at one school, and then in between they said, hey, no, next year y'all are going to go, your neighborhood's going to go to a different school. Totally different environment. I was at a predominantly black school. All my friends, folks who had been to elementary school with, who are now in middle school. And then 8th grade year, we get moved to another school where, I mean, it's my neighborhood. We're all going, but we don't know anybody. We're not there. And actually, the school was kind of a rival, as much as middle schools can have rivals.
Right.
But very different environment,
Okay.
predominantly white, different socioeconomic class, and I could feel the difference in the way in which we were treated, the ways in which we were looked at, the ways in which we were engaged by teachers, by other students, by administrators. And it was a very, very hard transition for me.
Was it better or worse or different?
Oh, it was absolutely worse.
Okay.
It was absolutely worse. We just were not thought as being the same caliber of student as those, as others, and you know, a lot of, you know, preconceived notions, just kind of discriminatory stereotypes and thoughts like that. So it was really hard. I mean, I was a good student and all of that sort of stuff, and so
you didn't see this coming, you know, it just kind of
it was not an anticipated thing. But I think it was in that moment that I felt, you know, probably for the first time in life, kind of what it was like to be considered as different, and not in a good way. And that was really hard. And so it was there that I think, you know, and I didn't have the words for it at the time, but I really began to say, like, I don't want anybody to feel this way. I don't want any of my friends or myself or others who look like me to have to experience this. And whatever I need to do in life or wherever I am in life to ensure that I can make that true, like that's not going to happen to folks, then I want to do that.
I love it. What's it like to be Lyndon Pryor when nobody's looking? I call it, you know, pillow talk with your wife, or when you're taking a shower, or the shaving. You know, when nobody. What's it like?
It is quiet. It is very quiet and really thoughtful, right? Like I think a lot in my head, and my kids like to make fun of me. They're like, "Dad, you're always talking to yourself." And
I thought that was just me, but hey.
No, I do it all the time, and I tell them the same thing. Actually, my dad, because he did the same thing. The thing that he used to say, like, sometimes it's the best person to talk to, and so it's
you get the answers you want, or
exactly,
maybe not,
get all the answers you want. But that's really what it is. It is just really, you know, quiet and reflective, and just the opportunity to sit and relax.
So this is kind of a twofold question, predominantly geared towards you, but what do you feel people may or may not get wrong about Lyndon Pryor, and then I'll say as well the Louisville Urban League? In other words, misunderstood.
Sure.
I think it's a human condition. We all experience that feeling throughout our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as far as I go, I am a very laid back individual in ways that is very, sometimes even unsettling to people in my staff. They're like, you're not upset, you're not rattled about these things. But I think that sometimes gets taken as somehow a lack of passion, right? Like people don't necessarily see that I'm going to be passionate about those things until they get me in a situation where, you know, that has to change. And so I think people kind of mistake that laid back nature and just, you know, this ability to kind of let things, not even let things go, but that not necessarily be bothered by a whole lot, as not necessarily being fiery about other things. As far as the league goes, I think part of what people don't know or necessarily understand is really just how much we do. I think, you know, most people know the Urban League, who know the Urban League, honestly, may know us for one thing or another. Maybe you've come to us for a job, or maybe you've gone through one of our financial education classes, or maybe one of your kids is in our youth program, and people think that that's kind of where it stops. And they don't realize all the totality of what the Urban League is and what it does, and how all of those things connect. And that, I will be honest, is on us, and it's something that we've worked to improve over the last several years, but we can continue to get better at. We've got to make sure that people understand all of the resources that are available through the league, and all of the different ways that we are trying to help and move our community forward.
You know, I'd be remiss as a host if I didn't bring this up, but you guys, you know, spearheaded with the previous leadership that unbelievably beautiful sports complex. I just wanted you to maybe speak to that for a moment, and how maybe that's transformed the league, or
Yeah.
if it's created different challenges, or what the case might be. It's a remarkable facility if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, so the Norton Healthcare Sports and Learning Center, over there off 30th and Muhammad Ali, always kudos to Sadiq Reynolds,
Right.
who was president and CEO at the time, and who spearheaded that project and led us through to, what is a $54 million build on 24 acres of what was contaminated land. And we are we have gone through 3 years of that facility, and it has been successful. It is in the black, but it is doing the thing that we said it was going to do, right? Like, it is certainly first and foremost an indoor track facility, and we've had phenomenal athletes, world-class athletes, NFL players, Olympians, the whole nine, to come down there and race on that track, and they've all loved it. We've seen thousands of kids come. And that's one part of it, right? Like, and that's amazing. That's one of the things that we said it was going to do. But the thing that we are proud of is that just last year, in track season alone, $9 million in economic impact to the city of Louisville. In the first year, we were able to count more than $20 million in total economic impact to the city. We are, they are going to this fall cut the ribbon on a Norton West hospital, and Russ Cox himself has said that there would be no hospital if there was no track. And so the things that it has done for that community, that is the thing that we are proud of. That is the thing that we are really excited about, is how it is changing, the look and feel of the West End of Louisville. That said, it also creates a challenge, because as economic growth and development comes, you have to worry about who gets displaced, who gets priced out. And so part of the thing from the very beginning we have said is, how do we ensure that the people who have lived here and suffered here are able to embrace and benefit from what is going to come for that, and that is going to continue to be our fight moving forward, and trying to make sure that those who are in the neighborhood, who are in those communities, are able to enjoy all of the fruits that are coming.
Well, if you haven't seen that facility, it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Been to a couple of events there. It's remarkable. So now I call this the dessert part of the Moxie Talk. We'll go quickly through some pictures here, and you can just tell what's going on. This is again about the gala.
Yeah, absolutely. So our annual Derby Gala, we are excited to have Grammy Award-winning, Oscar-nominated John Batiste coming to town, and so it is going to be a phenomenal experience. We're really excited about it.
That's great. And here you are looking at, maybe there's the passion that they were talking about earlier. You're looking pretty intense there.
Well, that's actually sitting with the editorial board of the Courier Journal, talking about LMPD.
There
and
you
so
go.
we're
I got
having an intense conversation.
There you go. And here you are. It looks like maybe a ribbon cutting.
Yeah, that is the ribbon cutting on our Kumon facility. So
That's
we are
great.
part owners of a Kumon facility where we are, providing high dosage intensive tutoring for JCPS students all around the city.
And then this looks like you're at outdoor track and field.
Yeah, that is at the ceremony for our Kentuckiana Bills. That's actually the graduation where we graduated our 600th graduate from that program. It's a construction training program. So really excited to do that.
That's great. Here you are, kind of in the way in the frame of my mind. I met you. You were talking with some authority there. Do you recall the event here?
Yeah, that's our annual report luncheon in December, and so we do that every year.
That's
and so
great.
It's our opportunity to talk about the work of the league.
Yeah, and here you are. Looks like out in the community. It looks like something special.
Yeah, that's at the conclusion of a walk. There was a few local community organizations that were doing a walk in the name of stopping violence, and so we're outside of Roots 101 there, but talking to the community about how do we continue to keep our kids safe.
Well, I appreciate you sharing those with us. There's a lot more pictures we could do, because you've been an active guy and had an illustrious, imaginative journey to get to here.
Absolutely.
So there are more pictures. Can you define leadership or equity in one word in the great English lexicon, as I like to say? It can be a phrase.
Sure. I can think of one word, and it's courage. Because I think in order to do both, whether that be lead or go down the path of equity, it's going to require courage.
I like it. Courage it is. What do you say if someone was to ask you, what is your why, Lyndon? What motivates you, in other words?
It's what I said earlier. It is seeing my community, those in particular who look like me and who have had those experiences that I do, have the most equitable opportunity to succeed and thrive. That's all people want, is an true opportunity to succeed.
Now, this might be somewhat of a controversial question, so I'm going to try to couch it. It's organically coming to me as I speak it. Do you feel like that the challenges that you're talking about, and you know, anyone watching this, I'm a white male, you're a black male, we're in the United States of America. Do you think the challenges that we face are part of the human condition, or is it the way America came up, or is it something else? And will we ever overcome it? And again, those are some bold questions.
Sure.
But I'm just curious your thoughts.
So, is it part of the human condition? To an extent, right? Like, I think human beings are prone to seek out difference. And what we do with that difference varies depending upon, you know, the society or culture that we're in. But difference matters, right? Like, whether that be on race, whether that be on gender, whether that be on height, weight, like people seek out difference. And so I think that is part of the human condition. However, the unique ways in which we have decided to segment ourselves and disenfranchise one another on the basis of race, I wouldn't necessarily say are uniquely American, because they didn't start here. Right. But the folks who brought it here, and America has perfected it. And perfect is kind of a hard way to describe it, but in many ways, we have become the world's leader in how we handle and treat race. And so that is uniquely American. What we have done, the history of chattel slavery in this country is absolutely uniquely us. And we have to own that, and we've got to wrestle with that. It is a part of who we are. It is part of our history. Now, to your question about, does it always have to be that way? No. No, we can absolutely move beyond it, right? Like, and we can change. We can do something different if we so choose. But we have to understand that we have the choice in which to do that. And in order to do that, we really have to decide, like, what are the benefits, right? Like, and who is benefiting from these institutions and keeping people as separate and segmented as we are. And once we start to answer those questions, I think we can get to a place of how we move into remedy.
You know, and this is my thought, opinion, not Metro TV or even MOXIETALK, just Kirt talking, but it seems like we make strides, and this is a subjective way to put it, and we kind of get up the road, if you will, and then there's an event, something happens, culturally, societally, and then we fall right back down, and then we kind of start climbing back up, and it just seems like, at least as long as I've been alive, it's kind of been this circular loop that never seems to unloop itself, and so it's an interesting observation as a fellow human. And I do hope, and I do think we will overcome it. But it's an interesting thing I've noticed.
I think the cycle that you speak of really speaks to our inability to remain consistent and committed, right? Like, and I understand that, right? Like, we have these fights where we move forward. I mean, we fought an entire war, right? Like the Civil War, and we believe, like, oh, hey, okay, we've gotten past this, we're on our way, right? Like, and what happened is, you know, those who were in positions of power and leadership decided, like, oh, okay, well, we can kind of let off the gas some. And then those who were, you know, opposed saw that as an opportunity to step back in, and they did. And that, you know, and we've seen that happen time and time again, and is what we are living right now. And so I think for those who care, those who are passionate about equity, about ensuring that everybody has a fair and equitable chance to succeed, we have to remember to remain vigilant at all times, right? Like, that you are not going to be able to let out, that you are not going to be able to cede any ground, because certainly the opposing side will take it. And that's hard, that is challenging, like, it's frustrating, because nobody wants to feel like, oh, I got to do this my entire life. But we're going to have to do it for a sustained period of time until we actually get to a place where that is the norm, and we root out anything that is other than that, and that is going to be necessary.
And one final observation, again, mine alone, you know, during the civil rights movement of the 1960s in America, I challenged a group I was with at one point, and I said, you know, all those people that were highly involved in that on whatever side, you know, are either now no longer with us, or they're not relevant, and yet we find ourselves here, you know, half century later, give or take, or more, and we're experiencing these things all over again with a whole new set of humans and Americans, and that's where I kind of began the genesis of thought of, is this just what we do to ourselves? Doesn't justify it, don't get me wrong, but it's interesting that you would think we would have not gone back and repeated things. So,
well, I mean, here's the one thing that I'll say to that is, you know, Ruby Bridges, who was famously known, and there are pictures of her integrating her school as a child, is only about 70 years old.
Right.
Right. Like, and so we are not as far removed from this time.
Yeah.
Like, my parents went to segregated schools,
Right.
You know, and lived through a period in which their school was shut down. Right. Like, and so these sorts of things, I mean, you know, Martin Luther King, were he alive, you know, would be 90, right? Like, it's not,
right.
It's not as far, we're not as far removed as we'd like to think that we are. And I think that's always important, right? Like, and I don't say that as a negative or something as a bit of a downer, but I think it's important that we understand that this history that we talk about that is so, as being so far gone or so bygone, is actually right here with us, living among us every single day.
See, that's what I love about you. You articulate so well, and you make your point, and it's powerful, and it's understandable.
Thank you.
And I love that. If someone were to ask you, Lyndon, what is the single most positive contribution you've made to humanity, what might that be? It's a pretty meaty question. You know, it can be interpreted a lot of ways: personal, professional.
Yeah,
global.
You know, I hope I'm not done yet.
Sure.
And here's what I'd say. I hope that they say, you know, when it's all finished. And I would hope that they say that, you know, my kids are among the greatest things that I've contributed to society. I hope that my wife and I are raising some kind, compassionate, caring human beings who will help to further the good things of this world. And so I tell people all the time, the greatest compliment that you can pay, you know, somebody is to talk about those that they have brought up, whether that be their, you know, their blood relation kids or those that they've raised or influenced. But, you know, it is the legacy that you put forth through others that really stands out.
Well, you can tell a lot about a human being by how their offspring turn out. Not everyone, doesn't mean everyone has to have an offspring, but you can judge a lot by the cover, so to speak, by how they turn out. So I appreciate you sharing that. What keeps you motivated, Lyndon? You know, when days or weeks get rough, you know, what keeps you going? You know, I ask this of every guest, regardless of their background, because we're all human, and even if we're doing what we love, you know, I always make this kind of funny joke if I'm Elton John or, you know, let's say Gladys Knight and the Pips, whatever, you know, and you wake up and you go, oh, I got to do a 70,000 person concert tonight, you know, but you don't feel like it. You know, you still got to go perform. You know, you still got to carry through with what you've started. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, you know, it's two things. One, you know, as I mentioned, I got two kids. They're small, and so part of what drives me is I refuse to leave the world in a worse place for them than it is right now. And so I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure that they have a better world to live in and thrive in than the one we have today. So that's certainly one. And the other, and this is particular to Louisville, is we are not as far away as I think people think, or that it sometimes feels like for getting things right. Like we actually can change this city and this town and make it the place that we all want it to be for all of its residents. And I truly, truly believe that we can do that in our lifetime. And so the fact that we are so close allows me to continue to dig, because I know at some point we're going to hit pay dirt.
There you go. I like it. I like it. Could you describe in particular detail a scenario or instance where you utilized your own philosophy on leadership? You know, you answered that question earlier. You used the word courage. Some guests like to kind of extrapolate that into this question.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, here recently, you know, we've had some conversations with, you know, police about policing in our community, and that's been certainly an ongoing issue here. And that's not always popular, you know, for folks. And, you know, it takes a bit of courage to be able to stand up and say, hey, these things aren't right, and we're going to continue to press on these issues, you know, no matter how hard it may make others, you know, feel or difficult that it may be to answer those questions, or just kind of in some ways even traumatizing to have to bring certain things up. But I have, you know, I feel like I would not be doing this job well, or quite frankly, living up to who I believe I should be if I didn't speak out on those things. And I'll say conversely, though, even in talking about things like the school districts, you know, the Louisville Urban League, and I am a huge advocate for public schools, and we believe in public education. But that doesn't mean that, you know, we haven't had to critique our public school system and talk about things that they aren't doing well, that aren't working as equitably as they should be. And so having to call out sometimes your friends and your partners and those people who you work with every single day to say, hey, you're not doing this as well as it should be, can be challenging and can be difficult, but those things take courage, and those are the things that we need to do in order to move ourselves forward.
What does Lyndon Pryor consider to be his biggest pet peeve? I think everyone's got one, and I think if they're honest, they'll know what it is.
Well, I mean, aside from being, you know, pretty impatient, like, so, you know, particularly on things that I think, you know, we can do and do fast. I like for things to be in order. I'm a bit of, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a neat freak, but I do like for things to be in their proper place, and organized. And so it's interesting, like even around the Urban League building, right? Like, and I've done this since I started working there. Like, I'll just have a habit of going in and like cleaning up a space and like arranging, you know, a storage room or closet or whatever, because I'm just like, we can do this better, right? Like, this could be a little bit more organized. And it's not so much for the sake of being clean, but I just believe in efficiencies. And so I think sometimes being organized helps one be more efficient and therefore more productive.
I got you.
So.
I like you sharing that. I think it shows a lot of insight into you as a fellow human being. If someone were to ask you, Lyndon Pryor, what do you stand for? Not how they may see you or perceive you, but what do you feel like you stand for?
Justice, right? Like I believe that we should always seek, you know, justice. And for me, justice is not punitive or about, you know, punishment, right? Like that can be an aspect of it, but it is about, are we doing right by one another? Are we doing right by those who are in need, those who have been harmed, those who have been wronged?
Now, this is a delicate subject matter, and but I love the way you kind of approached it when I met you, and the way you did it. I hope you can rephrase that as well. You know, I bring up this term, and when I do it, it'll create a response in probably anyone that watches it. But we've talked about the term as a society over the years called reparations, and we've talked about, and I'll let you take it from there. Can you explain that loosely, so that the average person can understand why it is probably more important than maybe it's perceived not to be? I'll say that as objectively as I can.
Yeah, so people have to understand that the root word reparations is to repair, right? Like, and so reparations from a formal sense is, in this country, speaking in an American context, is a debt that is owed. And I think it is really important that people understand that actually the federal government said that it would pay reparations in the form of land and money to former enslaved people and their descendants. And so it is an actual thing that the government said it would do, and that is owed to those individuals, those of us who are descendants of enslaved people. So that's one, right? Like just from a legal term, like it is an actual thing that we said we've done. I think the second thing people need to understand is that it is a thing that we have done before. And so we have done it with lots of other communities, some even outside of America, actually. We have paid reparations to various communities at various times for wrongs that have been inflicted upon them by the American government. And so that is simply an important thing for people to understand. But why it becomes incredibly important, in addition to the fact that it is something that is owed, is something that is actually owed to people, if we're going to talk about moving past harm, and when we are talking about moving past these institutions and these historical things, if we've never done something to repair it, and I think that's why it comes back to the root of that word. If we haven't done what we needed to do to repair that harm, then it's very difficult for us to actually do it. And so the legacy of that harm still exists with us today. There are things that we are still doing, policies, practices that are in place that are descendants of that very harm that we have yet to repair. And until we repair those things, we can't move past it. And so that is what I would say is why it's important, beyond just the fact that it's actually old, right? Like that should be enough. But if we actually want to get to a place where people say they want to get, like, can we move past this? Sure, let's repair what's been done. If somebody, damages your house or damages your car, you expect for something to be repaired, right? Like that is the expectation, right? Like that's why we all have insurance, right? So that if we bump into somebody's car, we cause a dent, guess what? Somebody's going to pay to have that thing repaired. Like that is just an expectation. That is part of the contract that we have across lots of different things. And so we understand it in that context. So why would we not understand it in another context where, okay, here's a thing that's been done to an entire group of people. So how then do we go about repairing what has been done? It's not enough to simply stop doing that thing. We have to actually repair the damage that has been done.
You know, we put a man on the moon, and we've done a lot of things as a country, but that just, and I say this subjectively, and we'll move on. The logistics of making that reality is the one that I scratch my head with. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just thinking, how do you even begin, and how politicized we are? And I'll stop there. I mean, that's a noble effort if it happens.
It is absolutely hard. But here's the one thing, or there are lots of things that I would say about that. But one thing I'll say in particular about that is that the longer we wait to start, the harder it becomes. Right? Like, and so until you actually do it, and this is the conversation that I have with my kids, is like, you can clean your room up today, or you can wait till tomorrow, but it's going to be messier tomorrow. So you're going to have more work to do tomorrow. You want to wait 2 more days, you can do it then too, but guess what? It's going to be messier then too. So the longer we wait, the harder it becomes, but it never changes the fact that it's something that still needs to be done, right? Like, and I always say, just simply to my staff and the others, is we can do hard things. We've done hard things. We, as you said, we put a man on the moon. We're trying to put a man on Mars. We can do hard things. We can figure this out, but we just have to actually commit ourselves to doing it.
Lyndon, do you think there's a difference today in someone, a younger version, if you will, of Lyndon Pryor that's coming up? Will their journey be different, better, harder, their own journey than yours? Because they may be asking themselves that as they're watching
it'll
this.
definitely be different. I am technically a millennial. I'm really a cusper, so right on the edge of Gen X and millennials. And so I'm not what you would call a digital native. Every child after me is. And so the influence of technology in our life, the influence of things like social media in our life has dramatically changed and altered what it is to come up and come of age in our society. But also, if you think about a child born, in the year 2000, all that they have seen and experienced, right? Like they've experienced a once-in-a-generation pandemic. They've experienced the world trade. They've experienced more than 2 decades long war. They have seen a huge financial collapse, a housing crisis, and a whole host of other things, right? Like, so they have lived a life doused in trauma in many ways, right? And have seen a huge amount of things go on. And so, they're absolutely going to be shaped and see the world in different ways. In some ways, that is better. And their experiences are better because the world is a significantly smaller place than it was when I was a kid. They can see more, they can engage more, they can understand more than I ever could at younger ages, or that we could have at younger ages. But I think the con to that is they also have far more things competing for their time and attention, and not all of those things are regulated. Not all of those things have the best intentions for them, and not all of those things are seeking to edify and promote them in ways that work. And so they have a lot more challenges in fighting for what is true,
right,
than we ever did. We didn't have to think about like facts or,
right,
or truth, right? Like those are things that everybody just widely accepted. Now you might have
when you read something, it was the truth.
It was the truth, but they now live in a world where truth is just kind of an option, and it is not one of these things that people abide by. And that makes life very, very hard as you were coming of age to reconcile what is and what isn't.
Yeah, you know, you get on your phone and you type in "our apple's bad for you," and you'll get all the ones that tell you why. And if you type in "our apple's good for you," you'll get all the reasons why. You know, and it's like, so which one is it?
Exactly. Exactly.
On a much lighter note, we ask all our guests this. You know, if the board of the Louisville Urban League said, you know, Lyndon, you've done such a great job, you know, in your early tenure, we want you to get lost for 2 weeks. You know, 2 calendar weeks, you know, 14 calendar days, 10 business days, ideally no technology, which we've already kind of talked about is almost impossible. Money's not an object. You really don't have any constraint. What do you do? Where do you go? Who do you take with you?
Man, so who do I take with me? I honestly take all my family, and not just my immediate family. Like I love my in-laws. You know,
now be honest, they're going to see this probably. Do y'all get along?
We absolutely
really
get along.
That's amazing. You should write. That's the book you should write.
Yeah, no, we have a great time together, and and so my wife has a huge extended family, and so I get along with all of them. But then, my aunts and uncles and cousins and my mom and parents. Like, I'd love to be able to go somewhere and hang out with all of those people. And I don't care where, honestly. It could be Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
That the where matters very little to me. I mean, I could certainly pick something. Yeah, but it is, I just value those times and experiences with family. And just to be able to see them, love on each other, to be able to pour into me, to be able to pour on the next generation. Is absolutely remarkable. I had it as a kid and loved to be able to give and share that experience with other folks.
It's very positive because a good friend of mine once said, when you go visit the in-laws, you become the outlaw. I was like, okay then, so that's great to hear that. That's great. If you could have dinner alone or with anyone living or deceased, it can be famous, not famous, it can be a group of people, it can be a buffet, liquor, no liquor.
Yeah.
It's your evening. You kind of already referenced it, in the previous question.
Yeah.
What would that look like? I think it gives a lot of insight into you as a person.
Yeah, no, that's an easy one. It'd be dinner with my dad, who passed away in 2007. We sit down and have some Texas brisket. Like,
there you go.
We're gonna sit down and probably play dominoes. Like,
there you go.
That would be it.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I'd love to be a fly on the wall, so to speak, for that one. If you could have written a letter to the younger Lyndon Pryor, knowing what you know now, what might you have told him, say when he was 10, 12?
Be fearless, take more risk, enjoy life, like it'll all be okay. I think, as young people, we are conditioned to be cautious in a certain way, to be measured in what we do, and that has its place. But we need to teach kids to be fearless, and I like I said, I had a good time in college and before, but there are a lot of things looking back that I'm like, I could have done this, I should have done that, I could have had this experience, could have had that opportunity. It would have been just a much more, I'd have had more stories to tell. And so maybe that would be my advice, is like, make sure you have all the stories that you want to tell when you're older. It's
very true. So you're our 435th guest in the library of the Moxie Talk guests. Roughly, sadly, we've lost about 10 or 15% of them over the years. So these little sit-downs become priceless. So this is our signature question. Nobody gets out of the rocket seat, if you will, the hot seat, without answering it. God forbid, Lyndon, you walk out of here today, for whatever reason, it's your last day on earth when you leave the studio. How do you want to be remembered by family, friends, people you are directly and indirectly impacting through the Louisville Urban League? How would you like to be remembered?
Hopefully as somebody who made a difference, somebody who loved out loud, somebody who was trustworthy and compassionate, but ultimately somebody who lived for change, and change for the better, not change for change's sake, but change for the betterment of others, right? Like not just for myself, but for other people.
Well, Lyndon, I'm humbled, honored. Thank you for taking your valuable time.
Thank you again for having me.
You got
I
a great
appreciate it.
story, and I love the courage and obviously the moxie, so keep up the great work. If today's discussion has inspired you, we'd love to hear from you. And if you know someone who has moxie and a story worth sharing, let's talk. Simply visit our website, moxietalk.com, or type in Moxie Talk with Kirt Jacobs on all your social media platforms. Until next time, I'm Kirt Jacobs. Thanks for watching.